Make no mistake about it, folks. We are in a war. We are in a war not just to preserve, but to now regain ground that has been lost, rapidly so, by the way, and preserve our way of life. The ability to make choices for ourselves. All right. Normally, I would say joining me on the WSMN Skype line, but not today. Joining me, because she is right across the table from me, is Melissa Robey from We Back Blue. Melissa, it is great to have you. Thank you so much for coming over.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You got to get your mic adjusted there just a little bit. Okay. First of all, thank you. And tell us a little bit more about We Back Blue. What is it? What are you seeking to do? And how can people get involved? Because this is something that I think a lot of people are going to want to become a part of.
Good. I hope they do. So We Back Blue started in June of 2020 at the height of the riots. We had our first march in D.C. up 7th Street, and we haven't looked back. We've had 33 events across the country, anywhere from a march to a rally to a community event. And basically, we want to help bridge the gap between communities and law enforcement. But not only that, we want to help our law enforcement. So we're teaming up with ballistics companies to get vests to officers that can't afford them, or we actually are putting on an online summit that is for police officers. So, you know, mental health in police officers is not at a high mark right now, as you probably know.
Right.
So we're trying to kind of help them smash the stigma. They want to get help for things, but they can't because they are fearing for losing their jobs or demotion or whatever the case may be. And so I put together an amazing panel of people that have experience. I have a suicide survivor, I have a chaplain, I have an author, and I have a bunch of people that generally want to help. And I'm putting this on for free for law enforcement and first responders.
And I'd like to put you in touch with some people that I know, that I've worked with, that I've networked with, that I think could help to really advance what your program seeks to do. And I got to tell you, the mental health aspect of law enforcement, I've made a career out of law enforcement. And, you know, for me, the way that I deal with stressful things or things that are unpleasant, sometimes are absolutely horrifying, is simply to just emotionally detach.
Right.
And that emotional detachment, I'm going to be honest, stems and it spills over into my personal life. There's many instances where people are like, you're a wall.
Yeah.
I'm a wall because that has become, here's a talk radio confessional booth moment here, because that's become part of my defense mechanisms and my defense structures.
Right.
Other people, they may not have that defense mechanism finely tuned. And so the manifestation of stress and the manifestation of the negative aspects of the job of law enforcement, and I think oftentimes it's not just law enforcement, it's firefighters, it's EMS personnel, it's anybody that has to interact with the general public when those individuals are at their worst.
Right.
I mean, there are people who you're literally working on who are either dead or on the brink of death. That's a stressful situation, and that takes a toll on people when you're seeing this over and over and over and over again. And I'm curious, what is the emphasis and the focus on that mental health aspect with We Back Blue? How important is that?
Oh, it's unbelievably important. So what started as marches and rallies and community events is now we're diving into this really full force because we've been asked to do this in a live version in the fall. So we have vendors coming to us saying we want to help. How do we get products in their hands and how do we get them the help that they need? And we've had Cop Line, different kind of mental health awareness places that they can turn to, reach out to us and say, we want to help you. We want to be a part of what you're doing, which is actually phenomenal. It kind of goes to show that we're not Back the Blue. We're not just another organization that's, putting a sign in the air and saying we love the police. We're actually putting our, heart and soul into what we're doing.
When you interact with the men and, with the men and women of law enforcement, and you talk to them about the anti-police culture, the cancel culture, the defund the police culture, the disband the police culture. When you talk to people who literally put a badge and a gun and a target on their backs when they go out into the streets to do their jobs and are spit on for that.
Yeah.
How do they, when you talk to them, how are they, I don't want to say reconciling this, but how are they coming to terms with this and finding common ground between the way that they're portrayed in the drive-by legacy media and what they're actually doing? and the impacts, the positive impacts that they're having on people's lives?
Well, I mean, I think one of the big aspects is being able to showcase what they're doing with communities. So, like, especially where I live, they go and they deliver birthday presents to underprivileged children, or they'll, they do a lot for the community that people just have no idea. So if we're able to give them that, megaphone and say, this is what they do. I know you think that they just wear a gun and a badge and write you a ticket, but that's not all they do. And they are amazing people. Every single officer that I've met has a servant heart. Every single one of them. They want to serve their community. They love their community. They love the people in it. And we have to get back to that. And we have to make sure the community is aware of it.
I would like to see any person who is a critic of law enforcement do a ride-along.
Oh, for sure.
I think it should be mandatory.
I believe
and
that too.
I actually think I think the majority is, I don't even going to say I think. It is my firm belief that every member of the media, before you report on that, you go out and you see what these people deal with on a daily basis. You see what it's like to be spit on. You see what it's like to be assaulted.
Right.
You see what it's like to be verbally harassed and verbally disrespected for simply doing something that contributes to the overall well-being of society.
Right.
It's an obscenity.
Oh, it's horrible. And you think of the traumatic situations they go through. I mean, right behind me, Rob O'Donnell, he was 9/11. I mean, they see traumatic things all the time, and they don't talk about it. They don't share that with people. So, I mean, my heart's with them, and my fight is there, and I'm here to make sure that they are taken care of.
Can we get, I know Rob's right behind you there. Can we get Rob to jump in?
Yes.
Come on in. He's circumnavigating the ropes and the wires and everything else here. So let's.
Do you want me to just share this?
Let's see where I don't know what microphone that is.
It's plugged in back.
What microphone is it a blue? Is it the blue one?
Blue.
Blue? Okay. All right. So let's, we're going to, the beauty of live radio, kids. All right. All right. Rob O'Donnell from Law Enforcement Today. Welcome. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, brother.
All right. So let's just get you potted up here just a little bit more. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about your background and then, of course, your role with We Back Blue and Law Enforcement Today, the publication.
Yep.
Right? Yep. I subscribe. So.
Yeah, I've been in law enforcement, public safety for 30 years. I started out as a New York City transit cop, back in the late 80s, early 90s, and merged into the NYPD. Worked organized crime, worked narcotics, worked, precinct detective squad, and retired out of the homicide task force.
Now, you were on the force during 9/11?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a fascinating, I think, glimpse into society. NYPD, NYFD, that's all you saw. In the days and weeks and months after 9/11, there was such a rally behind the men and women who, and you've heard the expression before. All gave some gave all. My other favorite one too is the one people see this all the time. They always ask about it. What's the number one with the star next to it? It's one ass to risk. And think about that.
Yep.
One ass to risk. And that's exactly what it is. You had men and women who went up those staircases knowing full well the odds were stacked against them, knowing full well they were never going to step out of that building again. The bravery, the selflessness, the sacrifice that was demonstrated on that day. And these people were celebrated as heroes. Today, those same people are being targeted by radical leftist groups in the very city that they worked tirelessly and gave their lives to help save other people. How do you reconcile that in a city like New York, where in 20 years, we have gone from holding first responders as heroes to vilifying them as jackbooted thugs of some type of imaginary made-up concept that the radical progressive left in this country firmly believes in and tries to perpetrate?
The perception of exactly what you talk about is one thing, but dealing with the facts in the matter, when you break down the data, how ridiculous their standpoint is after something like that we did, and not just 9/11. 9/11 was a greater scale on a national world stage. Look at what the cops do every single day, running towards that gunfire, regardless of who calls 911, regardless of the demographics, regardless of that. 9/11 hurts. My saying with 9/11 is, if you weren't there, no words can explain what I saw and what I lived through. If you were there, no words were necessary. If you've forgotten what happened that day, you're not worthy of my words. And that's something I say every anniversary to 9/11, because it kind of breaks down exactly what it is. I could sit with 9/11 first responders and we don't have to say a word to each other. We know just by looking at each other, just by shaking that hand or giving embracing them for a hug, because we know when we do such a thing, it's common with law enforcement in the military. You do that because you might not see them again.
Yeah.
They can get that 911 call to run into gunfire an hour later, the next day. So.
That's something that spouses of first responders have to live with every single day. That when you say goodbye in the morning or in the evening or wherever their particular shift happens to start, when you say goodbye to your husband or your wife or your whatever, that may be the last time you ever see that person alive. And that's to be honest with you, part of a risk that I think it's accepted. But when you hear people say, "Well, that's your job. Your job is to sack." No,
tell me another job.
When I was a police officer, no. My job was not to sacrifice my life. I mean, if I needed to, and it was the honorable thing to do, then I would absolutely do that. But I think just the cavalier attitude that society has right now towards law enforcement is startling, to be honest with you. I want to wrap up on this thought. First of all, is it fixable at this point? Can we restore the image of law enforcement and the way that the general society views law enforcement back to where it was, maybe not necessarily immediately after 9/11, but at least before, that there was respect for police? And I think most people do. But what's happening now is with a lack of education and with indoctrination going on, you're seeing more and more people now that are buying into this narrative that the police are bad, they're there to hurt me. You've got school districts now that are trying to eliminate school resource officers. We're seeing that all over the place. It's the impression and the narrative that is being put forth is that these people are bad and they're contributing to the bad things that are happening in society. Can we fix this? How do we fix it? And what are the steps that we need to take immediately, in your estimation, to start to rebuild that trust between the communities and the public safety agencies that serve those communities?
Yeah, there's always a conversation to be had. Policing, just like any employment, like any career, is not perfect. It'll never be perfect. But we need to have the conversations to make it better, as perfect as we can on an ongoing basis. But you have to start that conversation from a place of fact, not from a place of fiction, because if you're starting from a place of fiction, there's nowhere to go from there, except more fiction. Those conversations need to be had. We need to stop denouncing people that do speak the true data facts of, okay, if this is your perception of law enforcement, here's the stats that kind of disprove what you're believing. And a lot of times, perception's harder to deal with than actual reality, because you can't tell somebody how to feel. If they feel there's a perception, if they have this perception that this is what they think of law enforcement, you have to change that from the ground up. You have to change that from talking to as many people, again, having these conversations, speaking to them, having uncomfortable conversations, speaking about excessive force, so speaking about the small percentage of police brutality that does happen out there. Like I said, no profession is perfect, but look at the overwhelming 99.9% of the good police officers that walk out, the 800,000 nationwide that walk out their door every day to do a good job, day in and day. 300 million police community contacts last year, 30 million criminal investigative contacts, 1.2 million violent felonies across America, and you're talking with less than 50 shooting of unarmed people who are a lot of times, once you get into that confrontation with a law enforcement officer and they're armed, whoever wins that fight is armed. They don't have the option to lose that fight. So let's have those conversations. Let's talk about true use of force. Let's talk about policies. Let's review policies before there becomes an issue. Politicians and leadership, police leadership as well, are all so eager to throw the on-the-beat police officer, that patrol officer, under the bus because of something of the policy. Well, they don't write. No law enforcement agent in this country writes their own policy. It's the politicians. It's sad. Why wait for an incident to happen? Why isn't there an ongoing review by these same lawmakers, by these same city leaders and politicians to review that policy and make it better? Let's not wait for a tragedy to happen before we'd say, okay, well, the police acted bad, but our policy's not that great either.
Yeah. Well, I first of all, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. Thank you. And Melissa, the work that you're doing with We Back Blue, especially I think to integrate the awareness about the mental health issues there. That's something that absolutely needs to be discussed. I would encourage people to check out WeBackBlue.com. That's WeBackBlue.com. Melissa Robey, founder of We Back Blue, and Rob O'Donnell from Law Enforcement Today, and also a collaborator with We Back Blue. Again, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate your time here today. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You are listening to the Daily Review on